big arcade news in the last week and a half. Billy Mitchell, famous arcade guy, famous video game player, calls himself the video game player of the century.
Yes, self-proclaimed.
Was featured
he will tell
in
you too.
What was a pretty good documentary, King of Kong. Turns out his scores not as real as once thought. So Twin Galaxies had originally awarded him at least 2 or 3 times over the last 10 years the Donkey Kong world record.
Right.
Based on his new scores.
Yeah, he was King of Kong, kind of showed you some of that,
right,
where he would go back and forth with Steve Wiebe, and then later, I think Hank Chen broke the record,
right,
and he would get it back.
Hank Chen, famous doctor out of New York.
Right.
And then a bunch of people joined the fray. And it's now been basically perfected. Donkey Kong is considered as perfect as it gets the current world record. But Billy Mitchell, I mean, he has many claims to fame. One of his claims to fame was he was going back and forth with Wiebe in King of Kong. And it turned... And
Wiebe would do it live.
Right.
And in some sort of competition, he would fly out to wherever and compete live.
Anywhere.
And then,
I mean, that was a big part of the movie, right?
And then Billy would submit a tape to beat it, and then he would fly somewhere else to beat it live, and back and forth they go.
Shocking to no one. Definitely not anyone who's watched King of Kong. Billy Mitchell's videotaped score submissions, or just his word, not worth as much as once thought. So he was using MAME. That is pretty much definitively proven through a number of online articles, a number of research studies that have now been posted.
I believe it has to do with how the screen refreshes when the stage starts, if I'm not mistaken.
It's actually a glitch in MAME. The way MAME draws the levels in Donkey Kong is unique and not actually how the arcade draws the levels in Donkey Kong. And, I mean, it can be explained by the refresh rate of the monitor of a real CRT, the digitizing of what was actually chips that were inputting this data. There's a couple different reasons that people say that happens, but point being, the videos submitted by Billy Mitchell exhibit the exact same video problems as something that would be recorded in MAME.
Yeah, busted.
So it was so definitive that the Donkey Kong high score list, which was in partnership with Twin Galaxies but run by different people, has removed all of his scores from their list. And a lot of people have said, listen, if he scored 1 billion points in MAME, that's still pretty good. Billy Mitchell putting up 1 billion points in MAME, that's amazing. And but we've all learned, I think, in the arcade world in this last couple of weeks, MAME can be faked.
Right.
A MAME high score is subject to a whole different level of verification. Because in MAME, what you can actually do is continually save your state. And if you make a mistake, you just step back and you don't make that mistake. And, I'm not an expert on Donkey Kong. I can score like 100,000 points on a good game, a great game. And I'm definitely nowhere near that billion or million or whatever million point level in Donkey Kong. But if you watch his actual videos after reading about kind of what it would look like if you were trying to just keep saving the state and then fixing your issues, his game looks really disjointed. It doesn't look like anyone would actually play that way. And I think that was one of the big points that was being made in some of the investigations into his high scores. None of that looks like anyone else's play. So I think that's kind of been lost in the shuffle. Billy Mitchell, his high scores are gone because it's almost certain that he was playing emulated Donkey Kong, computer emulated MAME.
And they have a separate high scoreboard for MAME.
Right. And of course, even if he submitted what he submitted for that MAME high scoreboard, it would never be accepted. Because MAME has to be a locked save file that shows it has not been emulated, it has not been modified beyond the original game. It's pretty clear. Not only was he on MAME, but it looks like he wasn't really playing the game. At least not like a real person would play the game. So that's actually a huge blow. That is beyond, like, if it just turned out he's playing MAME, but he put in 1 billion points, a lot of people would be like, yeah, that's fine. But to have him almost certainly, we're not experts, we weren't there, but almost certainly Billy Mitchell has faked a high score on Donkey Kong for personal gain, and the powers that be, Twin Galaxies, just accepted it. Didn't look into it at all. Didn't question it. Didn't try to verify it.
It was the referee was the 1 week before exposed. Was it Todd Rogers? Is that what it?
Todd Rogers was one of the referees that was putting his name on the line, and Todd Rogers has now also had all of his scores removed from Twin Galaxies.
Right,
like 1,000 world records gone because he's a lying cheat. And he's admitted to some things, and he's admitted to only partial things, and we're kind of seeing that now. As a bit of a background, anyone who's had any experience playing arcades, now Chris is a world record holder, but anyone who's played arcade games enough to get good at them and go and look up the world records will immediately recognize that sometimes these websites, specifically Twin Galaxies, has a world record that is not possible.
Right.
Scores that are just like the famous example, and I don't even know if it's still up there, it doesn't matter. For years and years and years, and potentially right now, the Robotron world record ends in a 4.
Right. Or 80 or something like that. Yeah,
Right.
you can't you get multiples of 25 in that game. So
a number that was impossible to generate through the game. And it in the Robotron community, that's just been a big joke.
Right.
Because Robotron, I mean, they've done their huge 48-hour, 70-hour marathons. They've set high scores that are far beyond whatever Twin Galaxy says. But the point is, they don't even submit their scores at Twin Galaxies anymore. They don't care. Because once you accept...
I don't submit mine.
Well, if you go through Twin Galaxies, you'll see all these referee-verified high scores. That if you've played the game, you know those scores are just impossible. For one way or another. Whether or not they're too high... which they've now walked back quite a few records that are actually impossible. And it's not enough, right? So in Twin Galaxies basically has to start over to ever have any credibility. You have to reset the high scores. Anything that was referee verified.
Yeah, you have to have it on a level playing field. Like our own Chris Paga has snapped the 3-man Dragon's Lair world record. I don't think he could actually go through the present day steps to get a world record on Dragon's Lair verified, because there is a random scoring element to that game. So you have to play it again and again and again and again just to get it to work, and you'd have to potentially film every single one of those and then clip the right one and then submit it and then get it to go through all of their current things. Meanwhile, the world record is just referee verified.
Right. Right. And that's what's really interesting. And I've had conversations with Chris Paga before, and you could tell before all of this fodder came out against Twin Galaxies, he was really still a supporter of Twin Galaxies. He thought, even though he was playing really, really well, I mean, we're talking world class, he just thought someone did better. And now I know in the back of his mind, he has to think, maybe they didn't. Maybe they weren't as good as they say. And for example, that Sinistar world record that Chris Paga has been inching up on is bullshit.
Is it?
There's no way they actually scored that. As a pretty good Sinistar player myself, the way the scoring works, the way the play works, it just doesn't seem possible. And I've seen Chris Paga play near perfect games and still be 150,000 points short of the world record. Now, if you ask Chris Paga, he says someone must have just had a really good game. And I'm not good enough to ever to set a world record on Sinistar. But if you go look up that world record, it was set way back in the 80s.
84 referee verified is always the one I've just
verified by a referee.
I don't know about that.
It doesn't even list what referee. It doesn't list who did it.
I'll tell you the thing that drives me nuts about some of those they're not just referee, but some of the world records themselves is I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but I just went to Japan And some of the scores I see just casually thrown up in that arcade are way higher than the supposed world records.
Right.
So most of them are English-speaking records, or I could jump through the right hoops to get Twin Galaxies verified world records. Meanwhile, I saw a 75-year-old man playing columns to the point that it was all nines across. It was like 9,999,000,000
Right.
all nines, and he just kept going and kept smoking and somehow did not die of emphysema right in front of me. But right now, I promise you, he is in the bottom of Game Daytona Shiki or something like that, smoking and playing columns, and he's incredible, and he is way above the world record, and yet he will never get credit for a world record.
Well, in our own, great friend of Free Play, Lauren Featherstone, came to Free Play Arlington, broke the Tapper world record on camera with press, with dozens of people around the whole time, on a game that was filmed beforehand as being a legitimate game. On the game that she'd played. As obvious as possible. And I remember when she was trying to get her record recognized, she was getting random doubters. This was in a national newspaper. She was in the Dallas Morning News, one of the largest circulation newspapers in the world, with her breaking the world record of Tapper. They were already saying it. They were just saying she broke the world record. Now, Twin Galaxies hadn't verified it, and maybe that's actually a good estimation of what Twin Galaxies recognition is worth in the modern day. But she still went for it. She still wanted to get that Twin Galaxies recognition because in the grand pantheon of arcade game scores, they're still like the standard bearer. Whether or not they matter or not, people want their recognition. And eventually, I assume, I know they accepted her score, but I've never went to look at Tapper. Is she now on the Tapper page of Twin Galaxies?
She's at the top.
As the top?
She was verified. It didn't take too long for that one because it was so high profile. Now they do it all by aggregates, like crowd voting.
Right.
And because her world record break was so public, it got enough attention to get kind of pushed through quickly. Whereas, Dylan Smith submitted a big buck hunter world record that was vacant, and it's just sort of sitting there. Like, there's no one voting on it because...
If he was best friends with some of the people at Twin Galaxies, I bet that would be recognized by now.
Or if you could get him some media attention.
But if you look at Lauren Featherstone, her post, there are people in there not saying, I'm not so sure. There are people in there saying, no.
Right, correct.
There are people saying, I do not think you've set the world record.
Right. Well, their system now is set up to where if you vote no, then you're going to get your reward points much quicker than if you vote yes. So they've incentivized you to vote no, whether it's true or false.
And so, Billy Mitchell, maybe not even touching a real Donkey Kong, was recognized as the world record holder multiple times on Donkey Kong. And Billy Mitchell's probably a great gamer. He's probably done some really amazing things. I assume some of his stuff
was an
is
inspiration
legitimate.
to me growing up because he was the man who got the perfect game on Pac-Man.
Right.
And that's the first time I had
We all
heard of him.
assume that's legitimate, but once you go down that road, right, all of a sudden you start wondering, and he's the, maybe we should have known because he's the one who's been throwing those cheating stones.
Right.
He's the one who's been calling other people cheaters.
I think ultimately, if he wants to redeem himself, and I mean, he's going to go about it however he wants. If I were him, I would go and just perform whatever it was live. Just set it up
if
and
you look
knock
at his
it down.
live performances in the past 2 decades,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to actually pull them up. They're terrible.
Yeah. No, I remember him in the Pac-Man Championship Edition. I want to say last place. Yeah.
I mean, and this is a guy who rolled over original Pac-Man.
Yeah.
And they invite him out because they're re-releasing Pac-Man. He
Original creator too. Love that game.
allegedly practices, and he was so far in last place it was embarrassing. And that just, if you look at his competitions, that's what's been going on. So Billy Mitchell, probably a cheater. I assume he's a cheater. I've assumed for a long time though that Twin Galaxies is shady, corrupt, terrible. And I've been kind of, in my head, though there are other places that I trust, One Up in Denver, Barcade, Ground Control, all these great people that I respect that have these arcades right now that have retro games. High score lists at those arcades and our high score list are now what I consider basically the records. Because for one, I know that they were on real stuff.
Right.
Every record scored at free play has been on a real game. And I think that's really important. And we know that. And maybe that's unfair, right? Maybe that is the same trap that Twin Galaxies fell in.
Ultimately, what's going to matter is what the people around you think. Like, a high score only matters if it matters to you and your friends. That's the way I feel. Some of the high scores that me and my friends have are well above the world record, and some of them are dwarfed in a smoky room in Japan.
Right.
But because they are the people that I know and have met and come to our arcade or play on an arcade or whatever, like, that's the only thing that gives value to these records, in my opinion, because in the end, you can't authenticate these reliably. Certainly.
Interestingly enough, nothing on the Billy Mitchell... Oh, wait. There's a very, very small paragraph about this massive cheating allegation.
Oh.
Clearly, Billy Mitchell is all over his own Wikipedia. Because there is just a small paragraph in the After King of Kong section that says, oh, he's a dirty cheater. Shocking, right? Yes, he used MAME. Of course he used MAME. It's such a joke that, I mean, his response doesn't make any sense. I mean, his response is terrible. Like, all right.
What do you remember his response? Do you know it?
His response was, y'all don't know all the facts. Find the original tape. That'll prove me right. I mean, it's the same kind of stuff that as an attorney, when I was litigating, it's when I knew people were lying. It's when they start trying to say, go prove it through some way that doesn't exist. Go prove it through something else. When the evidence is right in front of everyone else. Now, in his defense, sometimes that's successful. He's probably convinced some people, his friends, his family, that just they don't want to think that he's a dirty, terrible cheater, right? Those people are probably convinced when he says, if they had only analyzed the tape. Now, of course, he never actually says, that's not MAME. He says, go analyze the tape and tell me whether or not that's MAME. That is what you do because he's not lying, right? He's saying, if you go analyze something else, if you find something that doesn't exist anymore, that'll prove me right. Of course, there is a website that says, we've gone and we've actually analyzed the footage from King of Kong. Not the footage that was posted, not the footage that you submitted, but the actual footage from King of Kong. And that still looks like MAME. That still has the glitch. And none of his live play looks at all like the videos that he keeps submitting scores. Because his live play is terrible, and the weird MAME crap that he submits has him playing mysteriously good, mysteriously avoiding things that would probably kill every other player in the world.
I want to tell you one man score that I believe. Lonnie McDonald and his joust scores. That man is legit as it comes. Lonnie McDonald goes to every joust arcade game he can find in the entire country and breaks the high scoreboard on them all. At any given time, he might have 75% of all the high scores in joust in the entire country.
Well, and in some ways, that's comparable to, like, Lonnie McDonald is a character, right?
Yes.
He is the king of joust, or I can't even remember what his website's called. But he has his own Twin Galaxies card. But he, rather than just submitting random world records or whatever, he goes to every arcade in the country and he plays every single joust machine.
Yep. If you have a real live joust and not emulated, he
does,
will be there knocking on your door.
I mean, as some people in the North Texas region have discovered, he only plays real jousts.
Right.
Fortunately, he has played 2 at our 2 locations, completely real. And it's really nice to get his feedback, too, because he's played so many joust machines. It's really awesome when he was like, how many plays has this joust had? He asked that about the Free Play Richardson one when he was there. And, I was like, our coin counter doesn't work anymore because it stopped at like 400,000 plays. And he's just like, what? That doesn't even make sense. And I was like, that's where, I mean, I don't know how many plays it has. Maybe a million. I don't know.
Whatever continuously played for an entire 2 years would be.
And that, we didn't get it brand new. So
right.
It had some plays, and then it's just been played a lot since we opened. But yeah, he goes and he proves it. And the only thing, he has his own standards. He doesn't play crap machines. Mm-hmm. He only plays good stuff. And he's come to us and proven he's the best. And he stops playing. Yeah, that's because he does what, 10 million points? Is that right?
Yeah, 10 million he stops. Mm-hmm. And that's what rolls the high scoreboard. So he wants all nines and then his initials basically at every just joust machine, right. Which I like this insane endeavor.
Well,
it's a nice bit.
It's fun.
It's nice seeing him actually perform. He hitting 10 million on our machines as it wasn't even a challenge to him. He just showed up, did it, and then left.
Have a conversation while doing it.
Right. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of what. It's kind of sad that he doesn't have more recognition in the gaming world. Where Billy Mitchell, great at marketing himself, I guess, has climbed to the upper echelon. You actually saw Billy Mitchell speak, right?
Yeah.
Last year.
Well, yeah, and we talked about this on a previous podcast, but when Lauren Featherstone broke the Tapper World Record, Walter Day and Billy Mitchell invited her to come out and, do their baseball card thing, appear on stage.
Right. They release cards with
accost all of us free play guys to get on stage as well. Stick a mic in front of my face.
Cards that might be printed at the nearest Staples or
have Lauren sign as many cards as possible.
Wherever they print their baseball cards. Maybe that's an interesting point to explore. How does Walter Day come out of all this looking? Billy Mitchell's basically been his partner in their gaming escapades for the last decade. After King of Kong came out, Walter Day has sold Twin Galaxies. There was a controversial sale of Twin Galaxies to our friends at 1UP, who then later had to relinquish ownership. I think they got their money back. I don't really know the full story. I don't know if anyone knows the full story. So that Twin Galaxies could be bought by some weird insiders that already had a ton going on with Twin Galaxies, who have proceeded to... Now, let me be clear here, guys. I don't like Twin Galaxies very much.
I couldn't tell.
I don't like Billy Mitchell very much.
Understatement of the century.
Now, I actually appeared in one of the big printings of Walter Day's Big Book of High Scores in the early 2000s because I played Counter-Strike, met him, and he was trying to capitalize on the new PC gaming fad. So he was featuring teams and stuff. Not like a major thing. I thought that was cool at the time. Now that I'm in the arcades, I think Twin Galaxies is basically the devil. I think everything that they have done in the last forever has been bad. I feel like obviously Walter Day in the 80s was so ready to accept high scores because he just wanted to have all the high scores, that they were taking as many shortcuts as possible to build a high score list that is filled with referee verified non-existent scores. And then all of a sudden you incentivize these people. Once they start getting popular, once Time Magazine comes out in 1983 or whenever they came out to take that famous photo.
Right.
These people were building careers on their high scores. We were just talking about it now. I can't remember what his name was. The guy who had 1,000+ high scores that have been removed from Twin Galaxies.
Todd Rogers, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So
Rogers.
he actually
I have that name right.
He got a job. Yeah. Well, I can look it up, but he got a job based on his high scores.
Right.
And yeah, it was Todd Rogers. You search for Todd Rogers and Walter Day and Billy Mitchell are the first 3 or 4 results. Anyways, Todd Rogers, the ultimate cheat. Walter Day.
Yeah. Billy Mitchell could never claim to be that bad.
That's true. Billy Mitchell does not have that many records.
Nope.
In fact, I don't think he does. His score on Pac-Man is perfect. So
at that point, his score on Pac-Man is perfect, and since you cannot score higher than that score, the record is basically a de facto time attack record now. how fast can you get a perfect score?
Well, I can't remember. Billy Mitchell at some point offered a very short-term $10,000 prize if you could do something that turns out it's impossible in Pac-Man. And I mean, that's kind of what he's done, right? He does these boisterous things where he is not at risk at all. And I think it was cathartic for more people than just me when it turned out, he's a cheat. Shocking that Billy Mitchell would scam people to make money. And I think that's one of the things that's missed in all of this. He was doing this for personal gain. Of course he was doing it for personal gain. That's why people do almost everything. I mean, that's the primary motivation is how can I, once he started making some money off of it, once he had all that notoriety, he had to keep being the gamer of the century, which I don't know who awarded that to him, but whoever gave it to him needs to revoke that. Give it to, Dylan
web.
Smith. I don't care.
It's a tangled web.
That's who I want to interview, Steve Wiebe. I want to know how he feels about this. Because, King of Kong made him famous.
Right.
I mean, I assume he's still teaching and everything that you saw, but he went on like David Letterman or some late night show because he was on King of Kong.
Right.
Something he would have never been able to do. I don't know what he's here for, but he's on a red carpet event in this photo at Spike TV Network. I don't think that's even a TV network.
No, they had the ultimate meltdown once they were getting nixed for good.
But I mean, gosh, I've thought a lot about creating a record repository.
And I pray every day you don't.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's just not worth the trouble.
It is an impossible task to verify, to actually legitimately know everything.
Twin Galaxies had like 100,000 world records. That alone should have told everyone there's some bullshit going on.
Yeah.
There's no way this is real. There's no way people have verified. And
it's hard enough to be the expert on Dig Dug. Just Dig Dug, right? Yeah. To know every single in and out of Dig Dug, what constitutes a perfect game. You can research that your entire life and still potentially get tricked by someone using MAME or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, I was thinking,
and that's one game, not 100,000.
Earlier today about how, these cheats that people are using aren't even that elegant. I have a ton of hardware knowledge on these arcade games. I could spoof all sorts of ridiculous scores. I, of course, will never submit a high score for anything. One, because I probably don't have the time to dedicate. But the other thing is, it's like we don't even know. We haven't even caught the good cheaters. I mean, we should have caught Billy Mitchell a million years ago.
Right.
And you have to wonder if the Donkey Kong players knew that he was full of it. Hank Chen?
I don't know.
The original surgeon going in there? I mean, they didn't even pay attention to Billy Mitchell, though, right?
Right. It probably doesn't care. He just wants to beat whatever the listed record is.
I mean, yeah, because...
Just dunk on it harder.
You've got one of the best surgeons in the world that's a top-level Donkey Kong player. I'm sure he didn't care about the $4,000 prize that they had at King of Kong, which Billy Mitchell has never won or come close to winning. Where is Walter Day? Has anyone seen Walter Day lately?
Last year.
Did he? I mean, yeah, I guess
I don't know where he is.
Let's see what he's up to. Did he run back to India or wherever he went in King of Kong after he sold? God. All right. Anyways. All right. I'll get off this. So great news though was that Billy Mitchell's a cheater and very clearly a cheater and doesn't deserve nearly the amount of the attention that he has received that we just gave him too. And some people have speculated that this is all a great publicity ploy for Billy Mitchell.
He may turn into that. Who knows?
Well,
he is resilient.
As a desperate person, he'll do all sorts of things.
Yeah.